Every day, the human brain processes a relentless barrage of external demands. Maintaining stability within this friction requires constant, active adaptation. Psychological well-being is not a static state. The World Health Organization and Carl Menninger define mental health as an active adjustment to the environment, one that prioritizes effectiveness, happiness, and the capacity to manage life stressors. When an individual can no longer adapt to these stressors, they begin to slide down a functional continuum. This starts as mental ill health, characterized by the absence of positive coping mechanisms and the emergence of negative attitudes. Further down the scale is mental illness. This is a medical condition that disrupts thinking, mood, or behavior, causing significant distress and impairing a person's ability to function in social or professional environments. Because health and illness exist on a sliding scale, clinical practice focuses on identifying the specific stressors pushing a patient toward pathology. The erosion of a patient's ability to adjust is driven by two primary mechanics: frustration and conflict. Frustration is the psychological distress resulting from a blocked goal or an inability to achieve a desired outcome. This friction often originates from environmental roadblocks, unmet personal needs, or conflicting motivational forces that impede action. While frustration involves a blocked path, conflict is an active internal disagreement between opposing opinions, needs, or ideas. A blocked goal is irritating, but internal conflict forces the mind to make a decision under duress. This makes conflict a primary catalyst for psychological paralysis. We can map internal conflict using psychological vectors, specifically positive approach forces and negative avoidance forces. In an approach-approach conflict, a patient is paralyzed by the need to choose between two equally appealing goals. Conversely, the avoidance-avoidance conflict occurs when a patient is trapped between two equally undesirable or painful choices. The approach-avoidance conflict involves a single goal that carries both positive and negative consequences, creating a simultaneous push and pull. Finally, the multiple approach avoidance conflict requires navigating several options, each possessing its own unique set of pros and cons. When these vector forces become unresolvable, the conscious mind experiences intolerable stress, triggering the subconscious to deploy automated defense systems. Sigmund Freud defined these protocols as defense mechanisms, automated methods the mind uses to manage overwhelming frustration and conflict. These defense mechanisms function by subconsciously and automatically separating the conscious ego from unpleasant events, harmful actions, or distressing thoughts. The first is denial. In clinical settings, a patient entirely refuses to accept reality, such as a severe diagnosis, to protect themselves from the psychological impact. Second is repression, where traumatic memories or unacceptable impulses are forcefully pushed into the unconscious mind. Third is projection. Here, a patient attributes their own unwanted feelings onto someone else to avoid acknowledging them personally. Fourth is displacement, which redirects negative emotions from a threatening source toward a safer, less threatening target. These initial mechanisms prevent immediate psychological collapse by altering, ignoring, or redirecting the perception of reality. Other defense mechanisms modify external behavior rather than just internal perception. Mechanism 5 is regression. When faced with conflict, an individual reverts to an earlier, less mature developmental stage, behaving in ways appropriate in childhood but maladaptive in adulthood. Mechanism 6 is rationalization, where individuals construct logical, though inaccurate, explanations to justify feelings or failures. Mechanism 7 is sublimation. This is the redirection of socially unacceptable impulses into productive or socially acceptable behaviors. Mechanism 8 is reaction formation, where a patient behaves in a manner exactly opposite to their true thoughts or feelings. Identifying these behavioral inversions is essential, as they often mask the true source of a patient's internal distress. The final category of defenses uses high-level cognitive processes to sterilely separate a patient from their emotions. Mechanism 9 is compartmentalization, the act of separating conflicting parts of one's life to avoid the cross-contamination of stress. Mechanism 10 is intellectualization. Here, a patient uses intense focus and reasoning specifically to avoid experiencing painful emotions. While these mechanisms provide short-term protection for the ego, over-reliance prevents the resolution of underlying conflicts. Unresolved tension eventually hardens into clinical mental illness. Recognizing these 10 subconscious behaviors allows clinical practitioners to pinpoint the nature of a patient's distress, establishing the necessary context for structured intervention. This structured response is known as mental hygiene, a clinical framework designed to manage conflict and prevent the onset of illness. Healthcare systems execute mental hygiene through a 3-tiered pyramid of promotive and preventative strategies. Primary prevention focuses on proactive measures, strengthening an individual's coping abilities and social connections before a disorder can occur. Secondary prevention is the critical phase of early identification and screening, allowing for prompt intervention to halt the progression of psychological distress. Finally, tertiary prevention focuses on long-term rehabilitation and reducing the effects of established illness by teaching healthy coping mechanisms. This system creates a structural safety net, ensuring that psychological theory results in actionable public health policy. Public health policy, however, relies on the ground-level execution of healthcare professionals. Practitioners use direct interventions to reduce immediate frustration, like facilitating deep breathing, maintaining clear communication, and validating patient choices to restore agency. Success requires boundary setting and managing one's professional ego to ensure objective care. A practitioner's ability to manage their own internal conflicts directly impacts their capacity to support a patient's mental hygiene. Mental health is not a passive state, but an active, ongoing adjustment to friction. By mastering the mechanics of distress and the ego's defenses, clinical practitioners become the essential guides leading patients out of illness and back toward functional well-being.